Right, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for attending this session about building resilient environments, incorporating security and compliance into database monitoring. So my name is Max Drobot. I'm a senior product manager with Redgate, working on Redgate Monitor, our monitoring tool. I've been in company with for now 5 years. I'm based in UK, and you might notice a hint of a French accent as well. That's where I'm originally from. So apologize for any mispronunciations or like any weirdness in my speech. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Joshua.
Hey everyone. So I'm Josh Higginbotham. I'm a senior architect at Centric Consulting. I'm one of the Redgate ambassadors, so glad to be in the session with Max. I'm based from Louisville, Kentucky. Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and I've been focused in on like modernization efforts around getting people from on-premises to the cloud. And I've been a part of some of these events that we're going to talk about today, the good, bad, and ugly of those, and kind of what were some of the things that we've seen throughout those events. But thanks for coming.
Hello, come in. So one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you about today is because as part of the monitoring tool for the last probably couple of years, we had more and more requests into how monitoring can help with security in general, with database security. So we've done quite a lot of work as part of Redgate on that, and we wanted to talk about some of the things that we've implemented, some of the things that you can use a monitoring tool for. So topics that we will hope to cover today are things around data availability, security vulnerabilities, user access management, compliance, and also securing your monitoring tool, which is quite important as well and sometimes omitted. But first, why are we talking about data security? It doesn't come as a surprise, really. I'm sure I preach it to the choir. But as the amount of data that the world generates increase, as more and more data is used around the world, also data breaches are increasing as well. Pulled some of the information from recent reports. So Hyper reports that there's been 239% increase in 5 years in the data breach they've seen in the health sector. And identity theft resource, the center said that they've seen plus 78% data compromises just in a year. And this is just 2 of the numbers I pulled, but there's loads of similar trends that you notice at the moment. Verizon publishes every year a data breach investigation report, which I found very interesting read. And in this year's report, one of the things they're talking about is how malicious parties get access to the data. It's mainly centered around 3 things: credential, phishing, and exploiting a vulnerability. So credential, always the highest level, the most used method to access data, basically. Phishing, self-explanatory, so that's emails, like you click on a link from someone you don't know, and here you go, you give them access. Now, you might notice that significantly decreased. There have been more communications, the tools have improved in general to filter this type of attacks. But exploiting vulnerabilities is on the rise. So this is things where basically hackers detect that there's a vulnerability before a patch has been released and just exploit it as much as possible from day one.
Who here is in management of IT systems? Couple. DBAs, system administrators, that type. So good reason you're probably here. Who's been under a breach event before? Oh, one, okay. So Centric Consulting, and I'm not here to sell anything, but I'm going to mention it just because of context. Centric Consulting has a cybersecurity arm where we deal with all of this. And the way that we've talked to clients is it's a when, not an if. You're going to have one of these events occur. And it's usually for things most often, and it kind of mirrors this report, because of credentials. I've gone into organizations and they've got credentials that are for previous employees that they've just changed the password on because they're too afraid to disable the account or delete it because they don't know what's going to break when they do that. Those are easy targets. Elevated permissions. Who's a DBA that their main account has admin access across all their systems? They're not using like a X account, Y account, whatever that may be. No? You may not be willing to tell me that, I guess. But you have technologies within platforms within Azure like PIM, the privileged identity management, where you can request elevated access for a period. So there are techniques to kind of help with this, but yeah.
And once they've got access, again, the report highlights what they're trying to access, what is the main target for those malicious attacks. And it doesn't come as a surprise that servers are by far the most popular target for this direct access to the data. Why is it so important?
Yeah. So I think there was one person, right, that had been under a breach event before. So the true damage does not come from that initial attack. It's the follow-on to that. It's the reputational damage. If you work for a company that provides services or products and you had a breach event that exposed your client's data, your customers' data, being able to recover from that may be impossible because of this stuff, especially when you do your root cause analysis and you publish that, because your clients are going to expect that. If it's something simple, and we look back in history and we see things like the Equifax breach that occurred, some of these other events where it was something that was so minimal, things like didn't change the default password on our firewall, stuff like that. That's hard to recover from. And there's history of companies that have had breach events or corruption events, and they've not recovered from this. So that's the biggest thing you need to look at is, what is that long-term impact of these events? How can I mitigate that? There's financial damage, whether it's fines. If you're in a highly regulated environment, you're probably going to be looking at that, especially if it's something that you've said that you've been doing. I've led IT organizations in the past. I had to report that I was doing cybersecurity training, phishing simulators twice a year, going through pen tests, all that. Financial damage can come from different ways. Operational disruption. If your systems are down, you're not making money. The first company I worked for in IT, if one of our systems, our sortation systems, was down, it was $150,000 an hour while that system was down. Recovery takes time. And then just IP loss. Whether that's data, because data becomes a product these days. We have seen events where people are unable to recover from a lockout event. And once it's out, it's gone. You can't get that back. And having a good backup strategy, having a monitoring solution that tells you whether your backups are being done, it can help around some of that stuff. So.
And what does it mean for DBAs? So the thing we've definitely seen is large organizations usually have data security team or IT security team, but the smallest organization, very often that responsibility falls onto people who are dealing with the data, so it could be DBAs. And even in large organizations, DBAs have lots of visibilities in things that are happening around data and are often asked to help with managing security and ensuring security of the data. So Redgate runs annually a survey that we compile in a report called the State of Database Landscape. And for the last couple of years, we've been asking a question around security and whose responsibility it is to look after the data. And well, as I said, there's loads of response around a chief information security officer or IT security team, so a team whose sole purpose it is to manage security. The overwhelming large response is for this is shared across multiple roles and multiple departments. There's also quite a worrying unsure of 6%, which is never good to see on the report like that when it comes to security. But yeah, overall, the responsibility of ensuring security of data is everybody's responsibility in an organization. And what we've seen as well among people who are using our tools is that DBAs are always asked for assistance with security-related topics, such as obviously vulnerabilities, not only detect, but also address them. Access control as well is, when an auditor comes and says, please tell me who has access to the database. Very often they ask someone to run a script or to at least pull that information when it comes to the DBA. Data availability, the core responsibility of a database administrator, that goes without saying. And as I just mentioned, auditing and compliance, so make sure that all of this is compliant and help when there's an audit, either external or internal. So how did I come into security myself? So I don't have a consultancy like you, Joshua. But as I mentioned, for the last couple of years, or even before that, we had lots of requests coming from DBAs who are using our monitoring tool to say, like, how can you help us with our security needs? And it comes from a natural place because the monitoring tool has quite a privileged access to the monitored estate and captures lots of information which is often asked in either an auditing case or when there needs to be an investigation because a breach has happened. And what we're going to talk about now is how a monitoring tool can help with some aspects of that data security. And as I work for Redgate, I'll use our Redgate monitor tool for exemplifying that. Now, obviously, there's other methods. Like Microsoft has SQL audits that can run on a server. You can also run yourself your extended events. But all of this requires either like a custom setup or someone to manage that, whereas a third-party monitoring tool already pulls the data and provides at the fingertip and helps with like saving time and giving you visibility in everything. That is critical for security. Right, let's start with data availability and continuity. So this is, again, by, it's quite an obvious topic. This is what DBAs are for, maintaining the availability of the databases. It's not just from an operation continuity point of view, but also from a compliance point of view. You have, if your database is unavailable, it's usually a breach of SLAs, therefore a breach of compliance, and you can be fined for that. Now, a tool such as a Redgate monitor that shows you the status of all your servers just at a glance across the full estate is something that helps you quickly identify whether there's an area of your estate that suddenly becomes less available. Alerting, also a key thing to keep in mind. I've seen lots of house-built tools that provide the health status, but the alerting is not ideal, and therefore important events can be missed or time to find an issue and then resolve it takes much longer than desired. Visibility into what executes against your estate, again, quite obvious one. And the things that is very important as well is wherever your database is hosted. So it's easy to focus on a subsegment of your server. So let's say SQL Server on Windows, on-prem. But really what you need is visibility all across your data. You need see it in cloud, regardless of the cloud provider, and ideally as well for different database platforms.
Who here is using Redgate SQL Monitor now?
I should have started with that question.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody working without a monitoring solution today? That's not a sales tactic. That's just to ask. So this was a big thing for me when I was a DBA. I wanted something that I could go into to know whether I was going to have a good day or a bad day. I've spent about 12 years in IT, and in total, 10 of that being an on-call rota person. And so if an event occurred, I wanted to be able to quickly identify what that issue was and be able to rectify that so I can go on with my way. And what's powerful about these tools, especially if you work in an estate where you've got multiple versions of SQL running or other flavors of SQL, I don't have to go in and figure out how do I identify all these metrics that I need to be able to capture to know whether something's good or bad. Whether it's Postgres now within Redgate SQL Monitor or plain old SQL Server. So
keeping an eye on uptime and general health of your estate. Second thing is backups, obviously. So mentioned before, when there's an attack, usually your database can be compromised, it can be corrupted, and you need a solution to restore your data as quick as possible. So keeping an eye and monitoring the status and the health of your backups, again, is critical to a resilient environment. Again, in Monitor, this is something we do out of the box. We look into the MSDB and keep track of all the logs of all the backups and provide you insight into when a backup was last taken, what kind of backups, and in general, making sure that every database has a backup and alerting you if that's not the case.
Question?
Of course. Yes. Sorry, say again. Sorry. So is it a question of whether you need to take a backup of the tool? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, so the question for no, exactly. Yeah, sorry, so the question for the sake of the recording was if you have an availability group and backup is taken only on one node, like whether it will alert that there's no backup on the other ones, and the tool identifies that, saying that, yeah, it doesn't expect a backup on all the nodes. Talking about availability groups, high availability as well, part of a resilient system, and having a visibility in the state of your replication, making sure that all the nodes are available so they can take over in the case of a failover. And just in general, things like whether the data is synchronized or not is very, very key. And with Microsoft now having more and more flavors of availability groups, now you have distributed availability groups, you have contained availability groups, there's more and more things to as well keep track on and make sure that they are all healthy and ready to take over in the case of one of them not being available. Right, so that was kind of the core purpose of a monitoring tool, and things that even not in the case of a security, but just for a normal operation of a company is good to maintain. So availability of your databases, making sure that they're all backed up, and making sure that they have also alternative in case of a failover. Now let's go to security vulnerability. So this is things that you need to keep an eye on to make sure to limit the potential vectors for attack on your data estate. And I'll start with SQL injection, which is still one of the most popular methods for trying to access a data in an environment. Things that you can use monitoring to at least detect or seeing whether there's a hint of SQL injection. One is unusual resource utilization, like if you're on a time where, I don't know, like a Saturday at midnight when normally you don't expect any activity and suddenly you see CPU increase, well, there's something fishy happening here and you might want to have a look at. And again, go into those queries and see is there any long-running queries with one single execution that is trying to run. There's also quite a lot of common errors that are tell signs for an attempt at SQL injection. So anything around failed logins, very classic. So someone trying various logins. Error 102 and 105 when the SQL Server syntax is incorrect. This is something you expect on your test or dev environment, but if it's in your production environment, then again, there's something else happening here, and you should probably pay attention to that. Attempts to access an invalid object, also procedure, always, again, a sign of someone not really knowing exactly what they're trying to access, but wanting to see whether there's something that they can get access to. And there's a couple of other areas where the hacker basically try to get more information around your schema or around your database, and therefore afterwards coming even stronger in a further attack. So things that get the name of the database, number of rows, number of columns, all those help them to get the information. And finally, all the areas involving permissions. So in Monitor, we have something called custom metrics, which allows you to create your own metric and start alerting on that and starting measuring it. And in this case here for SQL injection, one of the things we worked with one of our developers was to creating an extended event that will capture some of the errors that I've just mentioned here. So extended event sessions that we call monitor suspicious errors, and basically we'll count the number of occurrences of the error numbers that I've just mentioned and store them in a table. And then we have this custom metric that you can set up in Monitor, which then relies on that database, on the tables that you've just created, will count the total and will plot it in a graph and also alert on that. And that then allows you to, again, detect a highly abnormal number of the suspicious activities associated with the errors that might be a tell sign that something is happening and probably a SQL injection. There's more detail. I'm obviously going very quickly through that, but if you're interested in finding out more and going through the script or extended event session, we have all this information on our website.
Yeah, and some of this, this is kind of a starting point. You may end up having to expand outside of your SQL Server and do things in Azure, AWS, GCP, things in Azure. Maybe that I need to go look at telemetry monitoring. It shows me where is the traffic coming from. Could be coming from an IP range that isn't normal. Could be from locations that you don't expect traffic to come from. And so I can go into a WAF, a web application firewall, and block those IP ranges. I can say these countries are off limits because we know that we have no customers in those locations to kind of protect that. And then going back to permissions from the earlier slide, making sure that the permissions that you're using to access the application, have least privileged access. I've gone into organizations and I've seen their service accounts and their SQL accounts to have admin access because it was just the easiest way to get around some of the permissions that they deal with. Usually these things happen because somebody takes a short road or a shortcut.
Yes, SQL injection. So here in that case, it's not necessarily identifying vulnerability, but making sure that when something like that happens, you detect it soon enough and you can address that problem. In terms of leaving, again, open doors for potential attack, misconfiguration is, again, one of the most cited reasons for a potential data breach and always comes up in audits. There are a few configurations in SQL servers that are critical when it comes to ensure database security. So things like cross-database ownership chaining, where someone who has permission on a database can still access object in another database, even if they don't have native permissions. That's something that you ideally would like to disable. Remote access, well, the name tells it all. You want to disable if you don't need it. XP command shell or things like CLR allows to run within a SQL script like code or machine level commands. So again, you don't really want that if you don't need it. HTML with external scripts enabled. So all this you want to disable basically. And at the database level, transparent data encryption is a must, and really you need to make sure that this is enabled. Now, it's easy for me to tell that, and I'm sure that when you deploy a new server or a new database, it's all set properly. But what happens if suddenly your company decides to acquire another company and you need to have 100 servers to add it to your monitored estate, and you suddenly need to audit that estate? Or one of your DBAs or one of the teams who have quite a high access can start changing as well settings, and you can see a drift, or they forget, they do a test, they forget to bring the changes back, and suddenly you see that your estate starts drifting in terms of its configurations. So again, the SQL Server configuration options is data that we were capturing as part of monitoring because it has quite a lot of impact on performance. So it was critical data for a DBA. The thing we introduced recently was the ability to create a template. So it will be like your gold standard of what the configuration should look like. And that can be taken either from an existing server that is configured perfectly like you want, or something that you create yourself. And what it does once the template is created, you can select it, and it will run against the full monitored estate and will tell you the level of compliance. And if you click on it as well, it will show you where the drift happened and what is the configuration options that are not aligned with what ideally you would like it to be. As always, you can export the data, you can filter it how you want, you can slice and dice it the way you want. But at a glance, again, you can see how compliant, how healthy is the configuration of your estate, where there's areas that you need to look at to make sure that there's no open doors for a potential attack. Patching and update, obviously. So I mentioned vulnerabilities exploitation. Among those, still exploiting SQL Server versions that didn't get a critical patch is, again, quite common. So how to keep an eye on it? Again, this is something that we provide out of the box, where you can see not only the version that you're running on, but also whether there's an available update for this and whether that update has been applied or not and when. So again, at a glance, you can check the status of your full estate. Are you up to date with a critical update? Are you up to date in general in versions? And again, staying on top of the SQL Server version helps you making sure that you don't have any vulnerabilities that have been detected and fixed in a subsequent patch. So this was more around vulnerabilities. So SQL injection, detecting signs for it, patching and making sure that you're on top of SQL Server patches, and configuration of your servers, making sure as well that those don't drift over time and that they're compliant with either your internal standards or some well-known regulatory standards as well. Now, Joshua already mentioned a couple of times user access and how access is one of the most used way to access data and how critical it is. And it's all about who has access in your company to what type of data. And while the question is simple, actually, I was always surprised when I ask some of the Monitor users that actually the answer is not so straightforward, and very often people don't realize how their permissions are set across the full estate. Now, there's things that Monitor tool can help you with, and it's mainly around permission audits to detect everything that, again, Joshua's mentioned. So, principle of least privilege just gives the permissions to an individual in your organization for him to do his job, nothing more, nothing less. It's easy to give sysadmin to everyone, but then it's also like lots of risks. Good idea as well to double check whether a team like me or an individual still need access to all the databases. Very easy to give access. Revoking them, people tend to forget about that. And then, someone moved projects, and still a year later, they still have access to an old server or an old database that they were using in a previous role. And again, all of those are like people vulnerabilities within your organization. Checking accounts with many sysadmin access. Those accounts are, some of them are fairly legitimate, like someone in IT ops, very likely to have quite a lot of sysadmin access across the estate. But even though it's good to keep an eye on those, because those accounts with lots of sysadmin access could be, again, prime targets for someone trying to impersonate them, basically, and then suddenly get access to a vast majority of your estate. And finally, as well, beware of temporary permission grants. I found so many examples where someone was granted like the select on the table, and they forget to revoke it as well. And it's things that are easily missed, and unless you know that someone has done that, it's something hard to realize. So this is something that we are already providing some insight in Monitor, and we're building on as well to provide even more richness on that. The idea here is a new tab, a new security tab, as you see, and it has a full category around permissions. The starting table just shows you all your servers, all the groups, mainly around sysadmin, like all the SA ones, and the numbers of groups and the users. And if you click on one of those, well, you can search, you can filter. So in this case, in this demo, I'm searching for something called Monitor, and it pulls like the servers I'm after. And on clicking on one of the servers, then you have a table that shows you all the standard roles, and you can expand that to see all the people who have access to it. Now, this is my dev environment, so everyone has sysadmin access. Very bad example, but for the purpose of this demo, that's the only thing I had. But it shows you all those nested groups and how someone who might gain access to this might have like the sysadmin permission to your server. If I take someone like, you can search for a specific user. Like here, I'm searching Graham, which is our CTO. And I can see that my CTO, through all those multiple AD groups, suddenly has sysadmin access on the test environment for my products that I seriously, I don't know, I'm not sure whether he needs that access to or not. We have also the other way around for a user. So you can search for a specific user and see what that user has access to. So in this case, again, if I look for Graham, I'll see that he has a sysadmin access to that role. And this entry in the user category is very useful if you have, again, an employee that has left and you want to make sure that all their permission has been revoked. If someone has changed roles, as I just explained again, making sure that the permission have been updated as well. I think I've done something like nearly 50 demos of this to various organizations, and every time I had someone raising his hand and saying like, I have a disgruntled employee who might still want to access my data. How do I check that they have permissions been revoked? And yeah, it looks like there's lots of disgruntled employees who might do some attacks. But this type of things allows you to have visibility in this and checks that whether a person has still access or not to your estate. Anything you want to add, or you're all right?
Yeah, so the last couple things that we've covered, these are things when I was a database administrator that I have to go out and do manually. I worked in a highly regulated environment when I was a DBA. So like permissions audit was a reoccurring event that I'd have to do across all of my estate. And like we automated things with PowerShell and all that, but I have to maintain that. So that adds overhead to the team. And especially when it comes to like IT audit, that's something that you have to report on, that you're going to be expected to maintain and make sure that that's secure. And we've been bit by that countless times where we temporarily elevated somebody's access, went on our way. A month later, we find out they still have that access. And, you know, it was found in the next time that we looked at this. But with this type of a solution, you'll see that immediately. You'll see that drift and be able to go rectify that quicker than what I would have done not but 5 years ago.
Oh, sorry. Yes. No, not in this version, no. This is just for the permission, doesn't show you, sorry, again, I'll have to repeat the question for the recording purposes. The question was, does it show you the host machine that the connection came from? This doesn't at the moment, it's just a login. But yeah, we're planning to add more information around the connection as well. Oh, sorry, another question? So the question is, let me rephrase it and correct me if I'm wrong. If someone has access to a database and has changed roles and hasn't connected, let's say, to a database for a long time, does it help you see whether the role has been revoked, or if not, address that? Yes, in a version that will be coming very soon, where we put information such as last time a certain person has logged into a database, and helps you have that filter to see whether, like it says, inactive users, basically, or someone who hasn't connected to a database for a long time. Because you're right, inactive users are also a source of potential vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah, and least privilege may also mean you just don't have access. If you haven't accessed the system in 2-3 months, do you really need this access in the first place? You want to lessen that attack vector.
Sorry, before there's a question from the gentleman in the back. Yeah, so the question is about more granularity and not showing just the access, but when someone has last accessed the database and what have they touched, basically which table, which source procedure. So currently we don't. We show permission to an object level, so if you have a grant on the table, we'll show that. We will not yet capture when it was last touched by someone. I mentioned that we're planning to add in the next version of this, which should be coming in the coming weeks, when a certain user last logged into a database, so that will give you a chance, like whether to do it daily or not, and give you a sense of how they use, but what they have done in that database, or what they have operations, we're not showing at the moment. Yes. Yes, so this is a good question. Like the frequency of capturing of that information is something that we're currently looking at. It's a lot of data to capture, so we don't want to sample it too frequently, but at the same time, we need to tell. So currently in that version, it's sampling the data every day. In the next version, I think we've switched it to every 15 minutes, and we had quite a good performance result with that, so we're happy with it. But we might tune it a little bit, and there'll definitely be the option for tuning it yourself if you feel confident that.
And that may be something that you have to look at enabling, like SQL audit. and capturing
Yes.
that. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes. Yeah. So the question is whether the last login information persists across reboots. I don't know on top of my head. It's a good question. It's supposed to, but I need to double check. Yeah, it's a very good question. Yes.
I would assume it would be logged in the SQL Monitor database.
It is. I'm just, yeah, we definitely discussed that to make sure that there is continuity. I'm just now, you made me realize I should check that it's actually been implemented. But yes, we store that information ourselves in our repository. Obviously, we collect it, so we can do that, that connection, basically, to make sure it is.
We have a question over there.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah, those are the tools here more. Yes. Yes, this is a general question. Sorry, I'm taking a bit of a tangent, but it's an interesting topic because the question of auditing the user activity, not just the permission, is something that comes very frequently when I talk about that. And because we are a monitoring tool, we're actually capturing all the queries that people are running, for example. So there is some version of it that we explore and we can tie the two data set together and provide you some insight into it.
And that goes into like malicious activity. You know,
Yeah.
there are going to be individuals that have access and they were granted that access and they're going through some malicious activity. And that's what an audit would show.
Yes. Yeah. One of the reasons why we're a bit cautious with that and not, for example, doing extended event sessions that capture everything is just one, the volume of data you capture, we can be significant, in large organization, but also the toll it takes, the load it puts on the monitor entities within sometimes could be really adverse. So that's why we're being very cautious in what we implement. We test it further to make sure that we're not doing more damage than good, basically, if that makes sense. Next thing I wanted to show, again, part of the version that will be released soon that I mentioned. Actually, this one is already, I think, in the latest release. But we've been focusing as well on permission change. So I've showed you that we can show everything, like the state of the permission on a certain date. But because we capture the data and because we store it as well, the things that, when speaking to auditing companies, what they're interested in is actually comparing 2 points in time. It's not just a state of permissions, but it's telling like who gained sysadmin access to the database since last quarter when we last audited. And that allows users to then question, like, do they really need it? Why was the process followed for granting that permission, etc. So in these new tables that we've added, we're showing things like add a member, grant permission, revoke, and also who has done it and when. So it provides you that, God, I'm losing my words now, but that tracking basically of all the permission change and who was doing them. Failed logins, we mentioned it before, but we also have something that we'll include just specifically in this permission page that will track the failed logins and also the successful one. I think it could be useful as well. And that just visual, representation of the number of failed logins. If you have like a couple, it's probably Max trying, like forgetting his password and trying to connect. But if you're starting seeing like tens or hundreds of them, then it's usually a sign of a malicious attempt at accessing, like by brute force. Getting access, basically. So again, and you can be alerted on that. So again, something that we want to highlight and make sure that we have, that we surface that information and alert on it.
Like the call out to the Simpsons. Your logins.
Yes. Yes. This is kind of a design mock-up. That's the only thing I could show you. Yes. Right. Last part of our talk is around compliance. So everything that we've talked about now around data security, because it's such an important problem, obviously when it's an important problem, governmental bodies get involved and then regulation put in place and then compliance starts put in place. And it's all about ensuring that companies are doing everything in their power to make sure the data remain secure. And it's around efficiency, transparency, and privacy of data. And why is it important? Well, because you hear quite a lot, especially in Europe where I'm from, where it's like GDPR is a big thing, and every time someone breaches the type of GDPR compliance, then they're hit with a fine, even if they're not a native European company. Like Facebook was famously fined billions for a breach in GDPR, And all those big numbers are obviously not what most of the companies encounter, those are like extremes, but even like forget about the 15 million average cost here, but it costs money basically. It's back to why it's important, because all of those have a dollar impact, plus a reputational one, and therefore like share prices falls, etc. So all of this costs money. Right, compliance. Some of the things that we've discussed already now, especially around reporting or having historical data, are all things that are important when looking at compliance and being audited. So reporting, data trail, historical data. There's also something around having a proactive approach. We mentioned that, I think you mentioned it, Josh, was that if you wanted to have like user access information, if you don't have a specialized tool for that, then you'll be running your own scripts, your own like tools. And usually you do that only when you ask to provide the data for an audit. But by having that already available as a fingertip, you can proactively start managing it so that you don't find problems every quarter when an audit happened, but ahead of that and come like a bit more prepared. So not only it saves time, but it's also helps addressing problems basically more at beta cadence. I mentioned the configuration options. So one of the things around templates where it leads to it's regulatory standards. So there's loads of regulatory standards, and I've taken here like CIS benchmark, an example, that have a large section which is all about SQL Server configuration options. And while we're not providing like a compliance template for all the aspects of the benchmark, like configuration options probably a third of the CIS benchmark recommendations. And we created some reports that are available out of the box, and you can already select those and tick and see whether you will be compliant with that specific regulatory set. Yes? Okay. Okay. Yes. So the question is basically what we're showing here in the CIS benchmark template I showed about. Yes, this is purely the SQL Server configuration option at the moment. Now, there's other things in CIS benchmark, like, for example, patching that I've showed you before. So the information is there, just not in one single report. I think backups as well is a big part of it. We supply on those. So in this template here, this covers just the SQL Server configuration options, which I say is about a third of all the requirements. There's additional ones that are available elsewhere in the tool. And there's a few that we don't cover at all at the moment, but we're looking at addressing in the future. Yeah. Anything before I move on? Sorry, I forgot to give you the anything about compliance that you would like to highlight, or?
No, just the fact that that is a large activity every single time if you're in a highly regulated environment. And, maybe I was with unlucky companies that went through these types of things where the auditors weren't super keen on us saying, hey, give us a couple days to get this around or get around to be able to kind of compile this stuff. And some of that took effort to be able to go and grab. And when those events occurred where you missed the mark, maybe that's an okay event and you just have to go in and follow up later and say, hey, we corrected this. But in some ways, you can fail those audits and it has financial impact. Maybe you're not allowed to process payments anymore with your PayFac because you failed an audit. So I don't think I have to tell anybody at this conference the severity of these types of things and not following it. So it's always good, whether Redgate or not, that you have something that kind of helps support these.
No, I think I did say that compliance was the last part. It actually isn't. The last part is about the monitoring tool itself. As I just showed, a monitoring tool like Redgate Monitor or anyone has quite a privileged access to lots of part of your estate. And everything that I mentioned here can be quite reverse. So, if a monitoring tool identifies that someone still has SA access and is kind of dormant or unused login, well, someone who knows that information can obviously exploit that. So it's very important as well to not only using a monitoring tool to secure a database, but making sure that your monitoring tool itself is hardened and it's very secure. So there's certain things that you could be doing in that respect. First one is network connectivity. So your monitoring tool does need access to your network and to your monitored to the database or to the servers that you want to monitor, but you need to limit the number of ports that you open for that. In the case of Redgate monitor, we're using WMI over WinRM or DCOM, and that allows us to only requiring 2 ports for each monitored entity, one for the SQL Server, one for the machine. And we need additional ports to connect to Active Directory controller, for example, or to start sending emails or notifications. But overall, we minimize the number of ports that you need to open in your firewall to allow the monitoring tool to capture the information. There's also, ideally, Redgate monitor should connect externally to provide things, to check the licensing of it, for example, with the Redgate server, or to pull the latest SQL Server version. I was talking about updating and patching, for example. We need that information to come externally, as well as sending some usage telemetry. You can suppress that if you want. That's why I have a cross. We have ways of running monitor behind a completely air-gapped system, and you'll still have the same usability and same performance. It just requires an additional step. So you can really try to limit the way a monitoring tool accesses your network. Similarly, the largest organization, it's not uncommon to have different network segments, different data centers, and because monitor has this distributed architecture where you can have different base monitor, which are the entities that collect the data, it's a good idea actually to have a base monitor per network segment so that you only open one port for the web server to access that one, rather than having that base monitor in the network reaching out to other networks, which you can do, but it's just you're opening more ports in your firewalls to do that kind of things. So again, the distributed architecture allows you to have secure monitoring of more complex or more larger estates. Reduce permission on monitor servers. I'm still surprised when a monitoring tool requires sysadmin access to a server in order to monitor it and pull information. You don't need sysadmin access in all the cases, to be honest. You can set up all the set of permissions that allows you to capture the data without requiring for the highest privilege access. And this is true across all the versions of SQL Server, like on Windows, on Linux, on Azure, and Amazon. Again, we have documentation on that. I didn't go into the full details, but we have scripts to set up this type of permissions and removes the need for sysadmin access. Similarly, secure authentication, so people will need to get access to monitor itself, and same as any other app, nothing here comes as a surprise, but same as any other application used in your organization, make sure it uses secure authentication, multi-factor auth, or single sign-on, integrate with Okta, Entra, whatever you're using for managing access. And what Monitor allows as well is to restrict the level of access based on what that user has access to in your organization. So if you use, for example, Active Directory, it will mimic what that user has access in Active Directory in Monitor. So if you have a user who, who only has access to a few servers as part of his project, if he gets access to Monitor, if you grant him access to Monitor, he only sees those servers in Monitor. He won't see the rest. And some of the tabs that I've showed, like the security one, especially around permissions, those one won't be visible as well. Those one are only visible to the admin user of Monitor. Some additional recommendations based on our experience. So it's not just the access to Monitor entities, but it's also the server that is running Monitor itself. Make sure it's encrypted, make sure you reduce access to that as well. Lots of data that Monitor capture could be used as well, so make sure it's protected. Do due diligence on the software supplier. Is your software supplier reporting the vulnerabilities they find? Do they provide a CVSS scoring for it? How quickly is they fixing issues? As a certified, I'm mentioning those things not just for Redgate in general, and of course I'm mentioning because we do those things at Redgate, but in general it's a good thing as well to check who is your software provider. And same as we're talking about patching of SQL Server, patching of a monitoring tool as well, making sure that you're on one of the latest version and make sure that you have all the critical updates applied. Do I have something else? No.
I was just going to add something there.
Yeah, of course, sorry.
No, you're fine. So as great as these monitoring tools are, they're also a treasure map to all of your sensitive stuff. So, make sure that when you implement these types of solutions, follow the documentation, take advantage of the solution engineers at these companies to make sure that these things are implemented properly. And things change over time. How I used to implement these tools 10 years ago has changed because the landscape has changed. So even if you have been using the products for years, maybe you're going through a new implementation of this, you're moving to a new platform, whatever it may be. How you did that years ago may have changed, and just partner with these companies just like you would anything else.
So in conclusion, as we said at the beginning, like I truly believe that. Oh, sorry, there's a question before I move on. Yes, sorry. Yes. Yes, it is contained within the network. Yes,
Yeah, like
sorry.
put the web server behind like a private VNet, so it's not open to the public.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, sorry. I should have been more clear about the architecture of Redgate Monitor. We have 3 components. So we have this web server that you install in your own network. This is what connects to the base monitors. Base monitors are basically the entity capturing all the data from the monitored entities, and also sending the alerts so that it happens as quickly as possible as soon as something is detected. And you have also the repository, the repo, what we call, which is where the data is stored. All this is hosted in your environment, and everyone has access. Basically, everyone who grant access can log into the web server and see everything else. So we agentless, and yeah, you can give access to whoever you want in your organization. Yes, so I should be clear. The question is, do we run the GMSA account? And yes, you can. Yes. Oh, the question in the back of the room. Yes, of course. 2 questions. Yes. So, yeah. So the question is around if you have a multi-base monitor installation, as shown in the slide here, how do you handle updates? And yes, at the moment, the requirement for monitor is to have the web server and all the base monitor on the same version in order to run. Yes, you can run. We have different way of automating that. Like through PowerShell is probably the most popular method to do that. So you can roll out the update like in a sequential manner, but also make sure that everything is covered. But yeah, everything requires the same version in order to run. Yeah. Previous slide. Yes. Yes. So yeah, good question. So the question I have was, the question is, what is the extra step I mentioned if running monitor in an air-gapped environment? So the main one is around licensing. We as a Redgate company need to make sure they're using the licenses the way you purchase them and intended. So to do that, you need to download a permit, like a license permit from Redgate, and that permit can be stored on, USB, on thumb drive, whatever, and then you upload that on the web server, basically, and you save, and therefore your monitor installation will know that you have this permit. It will be valid for a year. You will have to renew it every year, and yeah, you'll basically be able to run. So that's one thing. So two other things are the updates, and SQL Server version data. So this is currently another file that we update as soon as Microsoft releases a new version of SQL Server or a new patch is released, and is regularly sent to the organization, to your installation, and appears in the estate tabs that I was showing before, where it highlights all the versions and what the available patches are. So in this case here, similar process. You'll have to download that file externally and put it on the web server, and the web server will consume it, and you'll see it as well. So there will be a little bit of a delay, but yeah, that's a price. That's kind of the price to pay for running in a gapped environment. No. The main thing is around. No, but you'll be surprised. Like the main thing is the licensing and running the permit, which I was surprised how many people forget to do it a year later, even despite being notified within the tools that it's coming. So that's why, That's why I still want to mention that extra step compared to normal usage. Yes. Well, access.
Yeah, I don't think it was picked up on the mic, so that's okay.
For user access? So the question is whether you can integrate with Okta to give access to monitor. Yes, this is yes, it's possible. Like in general, we're using our favorite method for authentication, OpenID Connect, and this opens the door to like integration with Okta, with Entra, with lots of other methods. Yes. Usually it's not on me, it's more on the team managing Okta in your organization, really. That's usually the bottleneck for enabling that or not, but yes. But yeah, you can run on Okta. Sorry, another question in the back of the room, yes. 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 Yeah, if you're in that situation, the tool will tell you where to get it, but it's on Redgate server. Yes, yeah, or if not, just contact our support team and they'll straight away will let you know. Yes, but it should be in our documentation. The tool should tell you. It definitely tells you for the licensing permit, and it does tell you as well. I believe it does as well for the versions. And yeah, and if not, yeah, reach out to anyone at Redgate and we'll be happy to point you to the right place. Well, on this good note, where was I? Yes, conclusion. Yes, so as I said, I truly believe that a monitoring tool can help with addressing some of the security and auditing needs. It by no means, it won't solve them on its own. You know, we mentioned network monitoring tool as well that are required as well. There's security and analysis tools as well, you know, like sort of Splunks that are used as well and where monitor can plug into as well. So it's definitely just one cog in the machine to ensure that your data is secure. However, it's one that is, you know, all of you have a monitoring tool. None of you have raised a hand when you sound like you're not using one. So it's already something that is available and that you should ask more from your monitoring tool to help you with your security needs. On this good note, any questions? I know we had quite a lot of questions, and it's always nice when the audience interacts. So anything else you would like to know about?
No?
No?
Cool.
Well, in that case, thank you a lot, Josh,
Thank
for
you,
co-hosting with me. Thank you for your questions, for your talk. And yes, very kind. And if you want to find out more about Monitor, so obviously you can look on the website, but also feel free to come talk to me or to my colleagues. And we have a booth, a Redgate booth, obviously, there that you can ask all the questions you want. But yeah, thank you very much for coming and for your attention and for all the questions and all the discussions.